everybody. The question we're going to answer today is how do you maintain boundaries? And we're talking about like healthy boundaries, not like with the teacher you say, "Hey, you really gotta respect my boundaries. You can't give me a score less than 95 out of 100. Like that doesn't work for me, you know. So gotta up your game." I mean, my answers are irrelevant here. Like, just give me like you have to maintain the boundary. You see, and that's not how it works. Like the first step to maintaining a boundary is setting a good boundary. But like, what if somebody doesn't respect that? What do you do? Ilakkiya, Deepak, answer this.
Well, you impose costs on them, right? Anytime your boundaries are violated, you're going to feel anxious, confused. It's going to make you feel bad. So the way to prevent that from happening is, well, you have to educate them about the boundary as well. If it's like a boundary you haven't talked to them about at all, then that doesn't help. So it also depends on the relationship you have with them. You might want to start off with the more conciliatory approach. Try to explain to them how they've made you feel and why this is a problem for you. And if they keep violating it, then you have to establish deterrence. So that's where costs and consequences come in. But the cost also has to be proportionate to the distress it's causing you, because otherwise we're having an escalating arms race of sorts, and nobody wants that kind of situation. So you want to make sure that when you are imposing a cost, it can be a psychological cost, can just be like a threat to enforce a particular consequence. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you might have to actually go ahead and enforce that consequence, but you still try to keep it down as much as possible and ratchet it up just a little bit each time the boundary is violated, because there's always a risk of escalating too much. But on the other hand, if you do not impose any costs, it doesn't change their incentive structure, the way they think of these things. Their cost benefit to violating your boundary might still be in favor of violating the boundary. So what you really need to do is think about why they are violating your boundary and find ways to work to change that calculus that they have. While that might not be entirely conscious for them, you still have to try and work it out.
So depending on the situation, I'd say there's a couple of ways to go about maintaining your boundaries. First one is do not let your boundary be crossed in the first place. So what I'm thinking about is, for me, where I'm working, I live where I work. So it's kind of hard to distinguish, when am I working, when am I not? And a boundary that I'm starting to set with the people who work, who I supervise, the people who I supervise is, don't don't knock on my door after 11, right? And I don't want to have to respond to situations after 11. Like I'm a student, I'm doing my thing. So the first way you don't let your boundary be crossed, or the first way you maintain it, is by not letting it be crossed. If someone knocks on your door after a certain point, you don't open it. That would be the first way to like maintain your boundary, by not even letting it be crossed in the first place. That only works for very specific boundaries, not possible for all of them. So in other cases, when it's being crossed, if possible, you either address it right then or you address it a little later. Something else that I'm starting to develop as a boundary is like the people who I'm close to, who I interact with more than once, I want them to get my name right. I live in America. People butcher my name every day, left, right, and center, spelling, pronunciation, all of it. So I'm starting to work on getting people to know how to say my name correctly and spell it correctly. So it's in that case, when they're violating my boundary by constantly screwing it up, even though we work together, I try to either, for that situation, I tell them afterwards, right? If we're in a public place with other people, I try not to tell them then, but I'll try to talk to them afterwards and be like, hey, here's my name. Here's how you spell it. I'm going to coach you right now. Let's go for it. Here's how you say my name correctly. And I'm going to try and do that. So it does take effort to maintain boundaries. And sometimes it's going to take repeated effort, like with things you tell your parents, and you don't want them, airing your dirty laundry all around town. You don't want the neighbor to know exactly what you're going through, or your classes, or your weight, or whatever it might be. So you repeatedly telling parents of like, this is not okay. Also communication, which Deepak mentioned earlier, just if you have to tell someone that they're violating your boundary, else they won't realize they're violating boundary and will continue to do that in the future. So as soon as it happens once, it does cause discomfort for you and the other person to maintain that boundary because you're going against what was considered the norm. But that effort is well worth it.
That's quite interesting. Did you know your name means literature? I mean, I'm sure you
I did know that. That's my name.
But that's a good point. Yeah. So, Akshay, what do you think?
I mean, you guys made good points. From Deepak, with like having cost and showing deterrence, and to like Ilakkiya, where you have to be strategic with your ways, because with your parents, you have to do it a bit differently, and and I'm just thinking, with teachers and parents and those people, showing deterrence is not the easiest thing, because like if you get on their bad side, which is like usually not like you don't get that so easily with parents. So if maybe they do give you some chances. Whereas with teachers, they could be having an off day, and you might have just like did a wrong wave, and you might get on a bad side with them. And
Definitely
then
don't try that with cops.
having to set boundaries is even harder. What?
Definitely don't try that with cops.
Yeah. So with these people, it's not just about us saying, hey, just set boundaries, just give them a cast, have a conversation with them, and it's a bit harder. And even like let's say they have a boundary, right? You might have a really need where you only get that from them, and
Right.
if they have a boundary against giving you that, then what do you do?
Well, you always have to be cognizant of power balance, right? So that is why you should try to establish a balance of power that always works for you. I mean, everybody tries to do that at some level. Countries try to do it internationally with controlling trade routes and things like that. We do it in our relationships with people. What we should strive for is some sense of equality where we can both act as we are, but then that's not always possible. There's always going to be hierarchies of power. And when you're lower down, then I mean, there's that old adage, right? The mighty do as they wish, and the meek suffer what they must. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is, right? I'm just being practical. If you have more power in the relationship, then try not to abuse it, right? Be kind to people whom you have more power over. Try to communicate with them, explain to them why maintaining the boundary is important. Maybe even try appeasing them. That's not always a bad word. I mean, the history of World War II has made the word appeasement sound like it's a very bad thing, but it's not always the case. Try that and then go towards threatening consequences. But again, make sure that you're being proportionate, you're being fair, you're being just towards your subordinates. Because if not, then they're going to hate you. And even though they're your subordinates, they can still sabotage you in several ways. One last thing I wanted to say was, so when you're dealing with authority figures, if you remember our videos about persuasion, we talked about different ways you could appeal to people, right? And so the framework that I like using is ethos, pathos, logos. So you can appeal to appeal to them using your sense of credibility. You can appeal to them using logic, and you can appeal to them using emotions. With the likes of parents, emotions might be more useful. With perhaps your teachers, you might want to use logic. So different authority figures, you want to use different modes of persuasion. At work, perhaps if you have someone you're reporting to, you would want to use your credibility there. So I think even when you lack power, you can still persuade them. So you shouldn't give up on that. You shouldn't meekly accept your lot in life. I think you should fight for what you care about.
That's a very good point. I mean, I wish we don't have to persuade, but because like that would be like the ultimate goal. If there was just like objectively like good, if the boundaries were just objectively good or objectively bad.
Are those a real type of boundaries? Just objectively true, objectively wrong?
I mean, we can think about it. We can talk about it tomorrow.
It's going to be a contentious discussion. Let's have that tomorrow.
See you all then.
Oh, you're still here? Well, thanks for getting to the end of the video. Hey, while you're still here, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get new updates when we post videos. Also, make sure to check out these equally exciting videos as well. Have you pressed it yet? Come on, you have 5 seconds left. 3, 2, press it now!